Well, now that many people have learned to live with COVID-19 and countries impose minimum restrictions, really, air travel has increased significantly. The airports company South Africa says it's recorded a 48% recovery in passengers for the first time in 2 years. The company says there's been steady growth for both domestic and international flights. Terence Delomoney is ACSA Group Executive for Operations Management and joins me now from Johannesburg for more on this conversation. So 48%, I can almost remember, Terence, it's almost like a moment in March 2020 when apps for flight enthusiasts like Flight Radar went from resembling beehives on various parts of the map of the world, to suddenly being clean altogether. Absolutely nothing clear, at least as far as South Africa is concerned. So are you saying to me that the skies above OR Tambo International Airport, Cape Town and other airports are buzzing once again, and residents of those areas are battling to sleep once again?
No, that's exactly it. Obviously, we are still behind where we would like to be. And, it's strange that you reflect on that time in March, April 2020, really a depressing time for all, but especially in our industry as aviation. So what we've seen, we've actually completed now 2 post-COVID financial years. And in that first year, our year ending March 2021, we only managed to achieve 22% of the pre-COVID year. So, for example, as a network pre-COVID, we would process about 42 million passengers as a network of ACSA airports. And in that first year, we only managed to do something like 8 million passengers. So last year, the second post-COVID year, which ended in March 2020, was a much better year. And I would like to also say that we achieved slightly more than the 48% that you mentioning. We did 50.4%. I think the 48% was an 11-month figure, but we now achieve 50.4% recovery for the year ended March 2022, which is phenomenal considering everything that even happened in the second post-COVID year.
Yeah. So what are the indications? What's driving the flow of air traffic as well as foot traffic at your airports?
Yeah, I think it's important just to look at the composition of the traffic. Not all sectors are growing at the same rate. So whilst I speak about a 50.4% recovery as a total, we'd find that it's largely led by the domestic traffic and the domestic travel, which grew closer to 60%. Our international traffic was still below 30%. And that's really driven by what we're seeing in the international, the trends internationally. As you would know, we've seen severe lockdowns internationally where each country had different rules. And I think that was really a challenge internationally in our aviation sector, where different countries had different rules. There were no, and various lockdowns were put in place. So it means international traffic and with the restrictions in place couldn't grow as much as domestic. Domestic traffic was basically some of the protocols that were put in place were not as severe. And really what is starting to drive it is initially we saw that, the business travel was actually not the significant driver in our initial traffic that we saw within the domestic market. Now it's slowly starting to come back. As you know, companies and many people are still working from home, still having meetings online, but we're starting to see that come back slowly. In fact, the MICE industry, which is meetings, incentives, conferences, events, actually was almost non-existent for the last 2 years, but that's slowly starting to come back. Mm-hmm. And we're seeing that traffic that traffic coming into being. So what we found is that that sort of led. So the visiting family, friends, relatives, leisure travel started leading the domestic growth, and then we're starting to see now that some of the business travel is coming back, and that's also leading to the increase in foot traffic. So you'd see, if we look at our network of airports, we obviously have the three major regional airports that we call them, being OR Tambo, which is our flagship and still processes the most number of passengers in the group. We've got Cape Town and King Shaka International Airport. You'd find that the rate of recovery at those airports were slightly less than what we call our local airports. So we'd find airports like George, King Paulo Airport, Chief David Stearman, even Kimberley and Bloemfontein airports having a slightly higher recovery because of the traffic mix that we have in those airports compared to the international.
Yeah, and I found
noting an airport like, sorry.
Yeah, I was going to say I found that quite interesting that these, local airports such as George Bramfisher and King David Stearman in Gqeberha are starting to pick up, and there's a bit more of a buzz. But before I run out of time, your customers are not only the people that use, that go through your airports to catch flights, but you are also a landlord in the sense that there are businesses that are operating there, and that I imagine that were in dire straits at the point at which there wasn't much happening at your airports. What's happening? What's the picture there? But also tell me about what the picture is, because I imagine you are also a nice dipstick point for the health of the aviation sector in as far as airlines are concerned. Are they coping with your taxes, for example? Are they keeping up with payments?
Well, that's interesting. I think this COVID has impacted all of us as an industry. As ACSA, we are severely impacted. In fact, we haven't gotten out of that, the financial situation, but we're slowly getting through that. And obviously, in order to support the aviation industry, we obviously needed to look at what support we could also provide, so that when we do recover, we're not going to have a situation of there's nobody else there in the airport to operate. So in our business, we have a regulated portion of the business and a non-regulated portion. And the regulated portion really talks to the airline landing fees and the passenger taxes. And, there's not much you can do in terms of the regulated. But when it came to the unregulated portion, that's certainly where we had to really look to see how we could support these concessionaires. And there were concessions made in terms of the terms of payment, in terms of deferring some of the payment, in terms of rental rebates. And we had to do that to ensure that when we start recovering and coming back, we start seeing an industry that's ready to operate. And I think if you look at it now, you're actually starting to see that. You're starting to see the airports normalizing again.
Yeah. Terence, lastly then, one of the things that does tend to happen, as we've seen in KwaZulu-Natal, is that you suffer a setback, and as you get up, something else hits you. And as you try and get up a third time, something else whacks you again. Talk to me about the jet fuel situation. It's been of grave concern for many watching the aviation sector, but also for airlines themselves. I remember about a month ago, the reports of airlines needing to go via Durban, international incoming flights via Durban to make a refueling stop. Others saying that they were taking empty planes and going to Durban. Since then, a lot has happened, obviously. There was that 20 million litres of jet fuel that was said to be delivered to you about a week ago. Give me a status update on that and other contributions, and what the trajectory is, really importantly, in terms of normalizing this jet fuel situation.
No, thank you. And certainly that was a difficult time. So the last month has been pretty difficult, really emanating from the fact that we had the floods in KZN, and from a logistics point of view, it was difficult to get that supply up to Johannesburg. So this is one of those instances where I think the entire industry had come together. And I think upfront, we need to say that when we monitor fuel, we are monitoring it at an overall level. So there was sufficient supply of fuel at the airport at a consolidated level, but the challenge was with specific international airlines that were supplied by oil companies that really got the supply from the coast that couldn't have access to this supply. So there were various initiatives that were put into place. Firstly, the companies that operate from the inland fuel refinery NATREF increased some of their volumes so that so companies that really get it from the coast could have access to that. Then there was a shipment of refined product that came through, which is the 20 million liters of fuel that you speak about. And just today we had our weekly fuel forum, and I'm happy to say that fuel is now sitting in the tanks at NATREF. And during this week, next week, and the week thereafter, the Transnet pipeline team will start pumping that through to the OR Tambo fuel reserves, which means those airlines that were still bringing in fuel in the last few days would now be able to get their full supply from OR Tambo. What we've seen in the last week is certainly also a reduction in the number of airlines that had to fly to King Shaka, for example, to be refueled. So that situation has also improved. We also had the Central Energy Fund that came on board, bringing in another 1.5 million liters of fuel. So that's also getting into the system. I think the Transnet team, Transnet Freight Rail, Transnet Pipelines, have done a very good job under difficult circumstances. They've managed to open up the northern rail corridor to bring in fuel that was left behind in Durban. They brought that into the refinery, so we've got another 1.9 million liters. So the situation is getting better. It's looking promising, and I would like to say within the next week or two, even those airlines that we're carrying some fuel in would be able to get most of the supply now from OR Tambo. Obviously, there are medium to long-term issues that we still continuously need to look at, which is just the overall fuel supply. But I think for now, that's how the situation is being alleviated.
All right. Terence, I've got to thank you for your time and your insights here on eNCA. That's Terence Delomoney, who is ACSA Group Executive for Operations Management, giving us a status update not only on the recovery of the aviation sector and the traffic at their various airports, but also, importantly, an update on the jet fuel situation that has been reported on in the last few weeks.